John Ruskin, one of the most extraordinary men of Victorian England, died in January 1900. He was offered a grave at Westminster Abbey, but his family followed his wishes and laid him to rest in Coniston churchyard. Ruskin's life spanned the Victorian age. He possessed the sharpest intellect of any era. As an artist and poet, critic of the arts and architecture, social reformer and conservationist. He was a catalyst. His 19th century ideals became 20th century realities. A caring welfare state, free schools and libraries, fair rents and smokeless zones, and the National Trust. Leo Tolstoy wrote, "John Ruskin was one of the most remarkable of men, not only of England and our time, but of all countries and all times. He was one of those rare men who think with their hearts." And so he thought and said not only what he himself had seen and felt, but what everyone will think and say in the future. Born in 1819, the same year as Queen Victoria, John Ruskin was raised in a cultivated atmosphere. Margaret Ruskin dedicated her son to God. His reading was the Bible, his recreation, a few educational toys. His father, however, a successful sherry merchant, traveled across much of Britain, often accompanied by his son. These journeys revealed an 8-year-old who wrote like an angel.
That hill with waving willows on its side, that stream that with rippling waves doth glide. And oh, what beauties has that mountain got! The rock stands high against the sky. Those trees stand firm upon the rock and seem as if they all did lock into each other. Tall they stand, towering above the withered land.
Throughout his life, Ruskin possessed the ability to draw extraordinary pictures, both with pencil and words, to see nature in the most intense manner.
Give me a broken rock, a little moss, and I would ask no more, for I would dream of greater things associated with these. I would see a mighty river in my stream, and in my rock a mountain clothed in trees.
Ruskin's first visit to Europe at the age of 14, inspired by the exquisite alpine drawings of the English artist J.M.W. Turner, confirmed his lifelong fascination for mountains.
Before me soared the needles of Mont Blanc, splintered and crashed and shivered. The very snow cannot cling to the down-plunging sheerness of these terrific flanks that rise preeminently dizzying and beetling above the sea of wreathed snow.
Through his pictures and their truth to nature, Turner became a hero and later a friend. When an attack was made on the elderly artist's style, the younger artist, now 20, wrote a vigorous essay in defence.
He went to the cataract for its iris, to the conflagration for its flames. He asked of the sea its intensest azure, of the sky its clearest gold.
The essay grew into a book, and the book into 5 volumes called Modern Painters. Ruskin, as can be clearly seen in these drawings, lifted English art from the formalism of the 18th century to the more natural style of the 19th. And through his writings, he was now firmly established as the most influential art critic in England. His influence can still be seen today. He was largely responsible for introducing Tintoretto and the Italian medieval painters to the English public. Ruskin particularly championed the pre-Raphaelites and helped re-establish interest in Gothic architecture. And he continued writing some of the most beautiful gems in the English language. Stones of Venice, The Crown of Wild Olive, The Eagle's Nest, and Queen of the Air. His autobiography, Praeterita, is the jewel in the crown. Ruskin's vision was unique and intense. He sought to find the very soul in a piece of rock, the petals of a flower, or a peacock's feather. And he saw deeply into the problems of Victorian England. In his mind's eye, Ruskin stripped away the layers of social etiquette. With the blindfold removed, he found a dark reality that few in his privileged position dared to even imagine. Poverty and misery. Overcrowded housing, bad sanitation, child labor, and inhuman working hours. Ruskin was racked with guilt and compassion. The machine of Victorian capitalism had become a horrific monster. In Ruskin's mind, it was a battle of medieval proportions, between light and dark, beauty and ugliness, between a society that cared and a society that destroyed. Ruskin was no coward. He took his fight into the lion's den, Bradford, Sheffield, and Manchester, then the capital of capitalism. He goaded wealthy industrialists who assembled for genteel lectures on architecture.
I will suppose your success is absolute. That from shore to shore, the whole of the island is to be set as thick with chimneys as the masts stand in the docks of Liverpool. That there shall be no meadows in it, no trees, no gardens. That the smoke, having rendered the light of the sun unserviceable, you work always by the light of your own gas.
Ruskin's creative outpouring reached fever pitch. He was drawing and writing 20 letters each day. 3 or 4 books were written simultaneously. He lectured around the country and travelled extensively across Europe. And he was appointed the first Slade Professor of Fine Art at Oxford. The sheer mental effort was too much. He suffered recurring and worsening bouts of physical and mental illness. His thoughts turned to the mountains and lakes.
I feel I should get better if only I could lie down in coniston water.
Then, within weeks, he was offered Brantwood and bought it unseen for £1,500.
I raise my eyes to these coniston fells and see them at this moment imaged in their lake, in quietly reversed and perfect similitude. The sky cloudless above them, cloudless beneath, and two level lines of blue vapor drawn across their sunlighted and russet moorlands, like an azure fess across a golden shield.
Ruskin threw himself into manual work. He had the house extended, building the famous turret, and a new dining room. He had a boat built, the Jumping Jenny. And together with friends, he built a harbour, reclaimed and cultivated the unusable fells, built reservoirs to drain the land and control the waterfalls. Above all, he returned to nature, perhaps hoping to regenerate his mind.
I am almost sick and giddy with the quantity of things in my head. Trains of thought beginning and branching to infinity, crossing each other and all wanting to be out.
Throughout this period, his crusade against uncaring capitalism continued. The time had now come to pursue his aims in practical ways. Using a tenth of his considerable investment income, Ruskin founded the Guild of St. George, establishing a museum in Sheffield for working people. But the ultimate aims were enormous.
That there be no taxes to pay. That everybody had clothes enough. That everybody had food enough. That everybody had jewels enough. That everybody had as many books and pictures as they could read or look at, with quantities of the highest quality in easily accessible libraries and galleries.
An English utopia. In Unto This Last and other books, Ruskin proposes free state education, social security, housing for the old and destitute, minimum wage laws, rent control, public ownership of transport, and a European trading community. In Ruskin's time, none of it happened.
The great cry that rises from all manufacturing cities, louder than their furnace blast. Mad for money, tearing each other to pieces and starving each other to death. We manufacture everything there except men. We blanch cotton and strengthen steel and refine sugar and shape pottery. But to refine or to form a single living spirit never enters our estimate of advantages.
It was more than Ruskin's fragile mind could stand. He became more and more isolated, a single beacon of hope in a sea of despair. Dark, threatening storm clouds gathered over Brantwood. Ruskin believed the elements were locked in battle between good and evil. In truth, the chimneys of industrialization were polluting Europe. The darkness in the sky reflected the darkness in his mind. During his last decade, he was an exhausted shell. John Ruskin died in January 1900. But Brantwood lives. Ruskin wrote with divine inspiration. Many great thinkers have acknowledged his influence, amongst them George Bernard Shaw, Gandhi, William Morris, and the early English socialists. But above all, Ruskin cared for people in an age when capitalism cared only for itself. Today, the flame of a caring society may flicker in a cool breeze. But while mankind heeds the words of John Ruskin, it will never be extinguished.
I desire to leave this one great fact clearly stated. There is no wealth but life